Hi, everybody. Happy snow day to you. This was what I thought we would do at practice on Thursday, was talk about the February topic. But since you're losing your practice today, it sort of makes sense to have me do this on a video. You can email me with questions today and probably tomorrow because I think you're probably going to have tomorrow off as well. And then Thursday, we'll really, as a large group, prep for the January topic. That'll be the last time we talk about the January topic, and then beginning next week, it's going to be all February all the time. I'm really excited about this topic. I think that this is the most complex public forum topic that I've ever seen in the time that I've been coaching it. I think it's really complicated, but at the same time, I think it's really narrowly focused, and it's a topic that doesn't really require an immense amount of research. I think if you know the background information, which is really important on this, because if we're talking about really complex legal arguments here. If you don't get the background information of what the Voting Rights Act is, what Section 4 is, why the Supreme Court ruled, like what the challenge was about, you're not going to do well. But if you get all that information and you can really go through the opinions for both the majority and the minority in this case, you're going to be in great shape. And I'm really interested in this topic. I feel like I know a good amount about it, so I can help you get into this topic in ways that other people might not be able to. So I'm happy that this happened in February for our district's topic, and I think if we put a lot of hard work in January, we're going to be in great shape to do well at the 2 district tournaments. I want to start with some background information. The case that the Supreme Court decided last June to strike down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was called Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder. Shelby County, Alabama was the specific place that was suing under the Voting Rights Act. There are lots of jurisdictions, cities, towns, states that have sued about the Voting Rights Act and said it was unconstitutional. Holder is the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, and he was the one that was being sued because, as you'll see, the Attorney General plays a really important role in the Voting Rights Act cases. Pay special attention to how this topic is worded because it's so different than any of the ones that we've done before. In almost every other topic, you're asked to weigh things at the end of the debate. Like we would be saying, this impact is more important than this impact, or economic growth is more important than, a loss of privacy. That's not the way this is worded at all. If the pro team can prove even one of the reasons why Section 4 was struck down and why it was declared unconstitutional, then they should win the debate. And I really think it's important when you write your pro case to put in an observation at the beginning that says that the Supreme Court struck down Section 4 for a variety of reasons, and if we can prove even one of those reasons, we would win the debate. I actually personally think the better side of the argument is the con. I think there's really good evidence as to why this Supreme Court case was decided incorrectly. But strategically, that might be a big benefit and a reason why you would want to go pro. Because really, if you can win one argument and you're going to lay out all the arguments, you're going to win the debate. Because all you need is one reason for something to be unconstitutional. You don't need a lot of reasons or even a big reason. You just need one. To give you a quick history lesson, and again, I think this is really important that you understand why we have a Voting Rights Act in the first place. You know about the Civil War. When slavery ends, the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution are passed to protect the rights of African American men. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment guarantees that you can't use race as a reason to keep people from voting. During Reconstruction, those are enforced in the United States, and you have African American men voting, serving in Congress. Those rights are all protected. What happens is once Reconstruction ends, Jim Crow laws, segregation, a whole variety of ways are used, particularly in the South, but in other parts of the country too, to block the rights of African American men, and then eventually, after 1920, African American women and other racial minorities too, but primarily we're talking about African Americans, from getting the right to vote. And this came about in a variety of ways. We know about poll taxes, we have literacy tests, the states. Because remember, in the United States, state and local governments run elections. The federal government does not run elections in the United States. When you register to vote, you register to vote in your state. Your county is the one who holds the elections. So states make rules about voting, and every state and city and county in the country has different rules, and they hold their elections in different ways and sometimes on different days. And all of those aspects of our voting system mean that states can do things that can have discriminatory impacts. And southern states would pass these poll taxes, literacy tests, and a whole variety of other different laws about voting, specifically with the goal to keep African Americans from accessing the right to vote. The laws didn't say you couldn't vote because you were black, but they were using all kinds of trickery and, to get around the 15th Amendment. And the Voting Rights Act was created specifically to try to stop that. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. It's considered to be the most important civil rights law ever written. It has a lot of different parts, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Initially, some parts of the Voting Rights Act were designed to expire 5 years after the law was created. So in 1970, they had to reauthorize the sort of special provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And that's happened a number of times since. So in 1970, 1975, 1982, and 2006, the Congress of the United States has reauthorized the special provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And when they reauthorized it in 2006, it was put in place for another 25 years. So if Section 4 had not been struck down by the Supreme Court, it would have been in effect until 2031. And at that point, Congress would have had to re-examine the law, make changes to it, and potentially reauthorize it. The Voting Rights Act has a lot of parts. There are three here that are sort of important to understanding the case that went before the Supreme Court. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act bans a jurisdiction from, you can see the quote there, creating any law or any new policy with regard to voting that has a discriminatory effect. Notice it's not necessarily that the law is designed to discriminate. So, for example, one of the things that have gone on in a number of southern states in the last 20 years or so is that they changed the way they do their city council elections. Instead of using like wards or each neighborhood elects a specific representative, they've changed it to having one vote for the entire city from a whole list of candidates, and the candidates that get the most votes get the spots on the city council. Well, the reason that they've done that is because there are certain parts of these southern cities where African Americans have a majority of the population, and they would certainly elect representatives to city council or school board or whatever the election is from those regions. But if African Americans, even though they're a majority in those little parts of the city, are only 30 or 40% of the whole city, when you have an election, it's likely that no African Americans would be elected if you did it on an at-large basis. Although these, you could argue that isn't done for a racial reason, the effect of that voting change is to disenfranchise African Americans. And Section 2 is what essentially makes that kind of behavior illegal. There are lots and lots and lots of challenges to laws under Section 2. It could be something as simple as moving a polling place out of an African American or another minority neighborhood, which makes it harder for them to vote. People have challenged voter ID laws on Section 2 grounds that this has a negative impact on people who live in minority communities. Section 2 is sort of the meat of the Voting Rights Act and allows the challenges. Section 5 was the most controversial part of the Voting Rights Act. It said that certain jurisdictions, and a jurisdiction here just means a state, a county, a city, that had a long history of racial discrimination, they needed to get any changes to their voting laws pre-cleared by the Department of Justice. So that meant if I lived in a county that had this long history of discrimination and was listed in the Voting Rights Act specifically as a place that had this pattern, and I wanted to change something about my election system, I had to send that to the Department of Justice first and say, here's what we want to do. And the Department of Justice would say, yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay. That's really, really controversial. Because remember, elections in the United States are handled by state and local governments. So this essentially let the national government have a veto power over the changes of state and local governments to their voting systems. And this is what many people found so objectionable. Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was the formula that decided which jurisdictions had to be subject to Section 5. So there was and it's sort of like a mathematical formula. If the place where your jurisdiction, your city, your county, your state had this history, this number of racial challenges in a certain number of years, then you would be put into Section 5 and all of your stuff would have to be pre-cleared. What the Supreme Court struck down and what we're debating about is Section 4, which is the formula. the idea that there was a mathematical way to figure out which places were more likely to have discrimination, and thus they were struck down. Now, anytime that and I'll switch the slide, you can see this map here. So this was a map in 2006 of places that had a history of discrimination. And you can notice some of them are states. The blue things are counties, so those are specific counties where there was this pattern of discrimination. And then the pink is townships. So that means that they were like little cities or towns had this pattern of discrimination. All those places on that map had to have their laws pre-cleared. And you'll notice that the bulk of this is the old Confederacy, right? I mean, most of these are southern states from the Civil War with the history of discrimination against African Americans. But that's not Arizona, a place where the discrimination is against Hispanics. That's not Alaska, where the discrimination is against Native American groups that the government was trying to stop. So you can see all of these different jurisdictions that were covered until the formula was thrown out as a result of this Shelby County case. The decision made by the Supreme Court was 5-4, so it was closely decided. And like I said, this just happened last June, so this was not, this is still a very current event. Only Section 4 was thrown out, and that really made some people think that the problem wasn't so much with the idea of preclearance. The problem was with the formula. And maybe if we just came up with a better way to figure out which places were where the discrimination was happening, then that would, in and of itself, would be okay. So you're really going to need to get into the details of the formula, because that seems to be the sort of really core of what we're debating. And I think a lot of people will miss that and just argue about the whole idea of preclearance, or just about the fact that there isn't any discrimination left. There were lots of places that weren't covered under the formula where there were discriminatory laws being passed. And, the U.S. Department of Justice was allowed to sue to stop those laws from happening, but it had to do it after the fact. One of the things about preclearance is that the change can't be made in voting laws until the government approves it, which means, if a southern state wanted to change its voting laws 60 days before an election, the Voting Rights Act, Section 4, would not have allowed that to happen. Now, they could make the change, potentially shift the outcome of the election, and then the Justice Department would be able to sue. And that's where some of the questionable, legal ramifications of this are. The 5 justices who sided in the majority were the 5 appointees by Republican presidents, and the opinion in this case was written by Chief Justice John Roberts. And it's a long opinion, it's very detailed, and it's going to have tons of information for you when you're arguing the pro. The 4 people appointed by Democratic presidents all dissented in this case, and the opinion for those 4 and their point of view about why this was the wrong decision was written by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's an amazing dissent, and it's a really, really good explanation. She gives you specific examples of why there was still discrimination going on in all of these different jurisdictions, and why they should not have thrown out the preclearance equation. What I'd like for you to do, if you're going to districts in the short term, is the first thing is you really need to read in more detail about the Voting Rights Act. And I looked at the Wikipedia entry on this, and it's not the Wikipedia entry about the case, which you could read, would probably be good. But the Wikipedia about the Voting Rights Act and what the different parts are and how it's changed since 1965, that would be a good thing to review and would really help you get comfortable with some of the terminology, because I think the terminology is going to be really key here. I think the most important thing is to read the opinions. And I will email you with the link to this video, a link that has both opinions listed. And it's really important that you do that. There's going to be some stuff in there that you don't understand. And if there is, you should email me and I'll help you figure out, to copy and paste a section that you don't get, and I'll see if I can help you with it. But reading the opinions is super important, because I really think that a lot of the things in your case can be quoting from the opinions, and you saying, no, that's not true. Justice Roberts answered that when he said, or Justice Ginsburg answered that when she said. And that can be the bulk of what you use as your evidence. Since the resolution asks us, was it decided correctly? Like looking at the opinions, which are the reasons it was decided, seems to be the key thing. We can go and get more evidence after that. But reading the opinions and understanding them is the most important thing that you can do. So if by the end of next week, we've read the opinions, we understand it, we can come in and we can structure our arguments, we're going to be in really good shape to write our cases and do several practice debates before we get to the district tournament in February. So hopefully this helps you get started. Like I said, I'm excited about this topic. I think it plays well to our strengths as a team. But it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be a long slog for you guys getting comfortable with some of the terminology. So let me know how I can help in the next couple days as we get through our snow days. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys on Thursday about the January topic.